Well, hello everyone. Happy holidays. It's your old pal Jeff. Don't call me Jeffrey. Dime. Just saying hello, just checking in. I hope everybody's okay. That's listening to this video or this audio, because that's all right now I have is this audio. Let's talk about gambling. Let's talk about the gambling world and the gambling epidemic. And this is for both people that are struggling with gambling addiction or their spouses, and some advice that I have based on my life experience going into that world and being part of that world for a long time. In this particular audio, I'm not going to get too much into my personal journey, my regrets, and all that, other than what is germane to the actual story. And we'll just put it there. When I was in my early 20s, um, the trajectory of my life changed. And I was basically a lost soul. And I went from really caring about life to not caring about it at all. And the real world was it just seemed so miserable for me. I just, I just hated the real world. And I was looking, I was looking to get out of it, go somewhere else, some alternate universe. And that's where the gambling world came. I started playing online poker. It was legal. This was in the early 2000s, and I started to make some money here and there. It's pretty decent at playing. It was a much easier to make money there. Um, I mean, yeah, I mean you could make thousands and thousands of dollars if you were just decent at poker back then. Today it's a lot different, but just getting to the point, that was an escape in itself. You know, playing online poker, making money, and when you're young, you think things are going to last forever. Trust me, I know. You feel like they're going to last forever, and they're just not. So this kind of easy money that was coming in, well, it kind of felt like it was always gonna be there. You know, you just don't have that hindsight. You don't have the advantage of having that life experience. So, anyways, I remember I went to the Borgata down in. I'm from Long Island, and I went down to the Borgata, and the first poker game I played was ridiculous. I had about $10,000 on me. I played a 6120 limit hold'em. That was the first game I ever played live at the Borgata. It was downstairs. It was when they had just opened up. It was a smaller poker, much smaller poker room than they have today. And I got my clock cleaned. I didn't even know how to handle chips. I just had played online and I had made this money online. But again, that's not the point of the story. But at that game, somebody there ran a game in New York City. And at that time in the early 2000s, the underground scene in New York City, as far as poker goes, was booming. All right, because there was a poker boom. People didn't want to drive all the way to Atlantic City during the week, especially. Not everybody loved playing online, this and that. It was also kind of like a sense of community um, for a lot of people. And so, long story short, for this, like I said, for this audio, because this is more about the gambling epidemic and some what I see coming in the future, and advice to people that are struggling and their spouses. So I'm going to stay on track on that. But somebody recruited me to go start playing in the city. So what I would do then is I'd play online during the day sometimes, but mostly sleep during the day. Then I would go to the underground club, play all night long until the sun came up on weeknights, and then on the weekends would go down to Atlantic City. Now there was a couple of things that were that drew me in there. One was it was an alternate universe. It was this universe where I was going to be sleeping when everybody else was up, and vice versa. And I was going to see all these other kinds of people, and I was so fed up like with the regular world, and I just thought everybody was full of shit in the regular world basically. And at least in this underground world, this alternate world, people were not like putting a mask over their flaws. They were kind of, I mean, yeah, they were got people with egos and all this kinds of stuff, but they were there. Their flaws were there. They were owning it. And and it was also a place where like the connections were going to be all artificial, and just being the way I am, I did make some decent real connections, but I didn't want anything real. And so this whole like artificial alternate universe um, really appealed to me. And you could say that maybe it saved me at the time. I don't know, because I just the real world was just like torture for me. It really was. It was torture for me. So that's my story. All right. So I get to play poker at home in New York City in the underground clubs and at Atlantic City, and that's my life. All right, and it's an alternate life, and it's with new people and all that stuff. So let's bring that now to present day. When I was doing it, when I started, if you wanted to bet on sports and whatever, you had to bet through a bookie. You had to meet up with the guy every week, this and that. Yes, poker was accessible, but other forms of gambling, the accessibility just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And this this little segment that I'm doing here is going to have a lot to do with the accessibility, right? Accessibility is a problem. It's a problem in today's society. And it comes down to this whole push and pull over the overarching argument over personal liberty and the restraints that we should put on it to protect people from themselves. And again, that's not what this is going to be about. That's a whole nother segment. So let's just get down to brass tacks. And let me tell you why gambling is so dangerous. And having a gambling addiction is so dangerous. And I want to make this first caveat is that I'm not saying that gambling is better or worse than if you're an alcoholic or if you're a drug addict or whatever. All these other kinds of addictions. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but gambling has a unique problem at its core. And that is that it is directly related to your finances, and therefore, if you're in a family unit, directly related to the finances of the family unit and structure. And that's why I believe, in general, it is very scary where we are right now as far as the growth of gambling. Because it's more likely to destroy families than to destroy individuals. And I will get to that a little bit when I make some examples. So, first off, just to make it simple, we'll take an alcoholic, and we'll use the husband in this situation. An alcoholic say he's married. We'll just say, okay, and we're going to use this for all examples. He's married 10 years and has 2 small children and has a loving wife. They both have decent jobs. They're middle class. Let's say they have about $50,000 in savings. Now, what I can tell you is I'm not a mental health professional, but I do kind of know what's going on with a lot of this stuff, and whether it's gambling or alcohol or whatever it is, um, for the most part, you're filling a void. You're filling in an emptiness inside you. Um, the gambling, the alcohol, all these things make you feel alive, and that's really what it is. That's I'm putting a broad brush on it, but I'm saying, yeah, you would have to go to a therapist and all that to get to the root of that emptiness and whatnot. But that's really what it is. It's an emptiness, it's a void. That's what you're trying to fill. So let's take the alcoholic and let's use that family. And let's say, loving spouse, man, woman, 10 years married, let's say two small children, middle class, all that, 50 grand in savings. Um, the man's an alcoholic, but the wife, and in all situations, the wife's going to be a loving wife. She loves him unconditionally, and she wants him to get better. And let's say he's been going to AA, doing the meetings, and has abstained from alcohol for a very long time, and he's doing well. Trigger event happens, and he has a bender. He goes, spends maybe what, five, six, $700. Let's say he goes on a bender for a few days, makes a fool out of himself, gets really drunk, obviously blacks out, this and that, maybe does it a couple times. But he survives. He doesn't get in the car and drive. He doesn't hurt anybody. He doesn't kill anybody. He doesn't cheat on his wife. He fell off the wagon. He messed up big time. But he's still in one piece. And the bank account maybe has $500-$600 less in it from his bender. So he goes to his wife now, and he says, "Sweetie, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. It'll never happen again." And she says, "Okay. You didn't harm anybody but yourself. Not counting the emotional harm on her and the kids. I'm not discounting that. But she can forgive it." And she says, go to a meeting that night and we'll start over day one. Okay? Now, in this scenario, like again, I want to be very clear. I'm not minimizing alcoholism. It's a huge problem. But what I'm saying here is that this, in this example that I'm giving, this individual, although certainly causing emotional distress to his partner, to his children, he can start over without disrupting the family in a major way. Now, let's go to the two gambling examples. I'm going to have two gambling examples, okay? The first gambling example, the man's going to GA, right? Just like the alcoholic was going to AA. And he seems to have things under control, right? The money in the bank account seems to be stable, and everything seems okay. All right, but these apps, Fanatics, FanDuel, whatever, they're so accessible, they're so normalized, and you can load money on them super quick. So some kind of trigger event happens, and he transfers that savings to the checking, which he can do, basically online. You don't even have to go to the ATM. He uses that money to gamble. Goes on a bender 3-4 days. Then he comes to his wife after it's done. And he says, "Sweetie, I'm really sorry. I messed up. But I'm still here. I'm still breathing. And I'll go to a meeting tonight, and I'll start over at day one." But she looks in that savings account, and that savings account has, let's say, 20 grand left in it. And believe me, you can move $10,000 a day easily on these apps. You can do that. So in 3 days, losing 30,000, if he had access to the bank, very doable. He's just like the alcoholic, he's filling some kind of void, some kind of emptiness. And I don't know if they're getting to that emptiness in GA or in AA. I don't know if they're getting to the root of the cause, because I don't know. I don't know the programs exactly. I would think you would need therapy to get to the root of that cause. I think the AA and GA is a lot about accountability, having other people hold you accountable, and I'm not in any way negating that piece of it. It's pivotal. But if you're not addressing that emptiness and that void, well, maybe you'll still make it. Life's short enough that maybe you'll still make it, just with the accountability piece and not going into that void. But maybe you won't. It's a gamble. So when he goes to his wife now and asks for forgiveness and to start over, and she's a loving wife, and you got lucky you didn't marry some sociopath, and she wants to help him, but now it's not just him starting over. The whole financial stability of the family unit is affected. The kids are now affected. The plans that they had are now affected. Their lifestyle may be affected. So it's not as simple as saying, go to a meeting, start over. No, it's not. There are real devastating consequences to what happened here, beyond just the emotional distress caused to the spouse and the children. And that's what makes gambling so dangerous, particularly to families. Now let's try example 2 of the gambling, of the man with the gambling problem. Now, let's say this wife, she did her homework, and she knew to take every safeguard that she possibly could to prevent him from gambling. She knew that these websites, these apps, have self-exclusion, and casinos have self-exclusion. And she made sure that her husband self-excluded from those casinos and from the apps. So under his name, he can't go into those casinos, he can't go onto those apps, he can't load money on. Now, he could still circumvent the system and go onto these social casinos, which is a whole nother thing. But it's going to be much, much harder for him to lose substantial money, to move substantial money when he's circumventing this, either by going into other, social casinos or betting through somebody else. It's going to be harder for him to lose serious, serious dough. But he goes on this bender. And this is where the callback to that underground world, for me, comes in. Because that's where he went. He went to the underground. And he asked the bookie to bet on credit. You can't self-exclude from bookies. She can't call She can't call the bookies, she can't call the underworld, the underground, whatever you want to say, and tell them not to take her husband's action. So he goes on a bender 3 or 4 days. And she did all these things. I mean, she even has, let's say she even has the savings account in her name, and she keeps him on an allowance, basically. She puts money on a debit card for him for the week. That's it. And she treats him like a child because he has to be. So she self-excluded him and did that. So he has very, very little access to actual funds. But now he comes up and he says, well, I fell off the wagon and I lost a bunch of money. And she checks the savings account and the money's pretty much all there. And the bank, the money's still there. So what money did you lose? No. Now he was betting on credit into the underworld. And now he owes whatever it is, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. Who knows? And now that all the safeguards that she took, now they have the underground in their life. Now they have to figure out how to pay this guy off or this group of guys off. And that's the rub. And that's where the underground still can really thrive in today's society. Even with the accessibility of all these gambling apps and whatnot. So now when he says let's start over, well, now again, it's not like the alcoholic going to that meeting. Now this person that took their bets is in their life and they got to pay him off. And one way or another, that's going to deplete their savings and that's going to change their lives. That's going to change this financial stability of the family unit. That's going to affect the children. And this wife was smart enough and she did everything. She did everything she could. And she knew he could still circumvent, but she had no idea that he could go and lose, $30,000-$40,000 without putting up a penny. And that's why gambling and the gambling epidemic and the accessibility is so, so dangerous. So what would I say to that spouse? What would I say to that spouse? I don't want, if you love your husband, I would never tell anybody to leave them or that somebody's a lost cause. I would say if it's doable, it's doable. But now what that person needs, what that man with the problem needs, is he needs a full-time babysitter. And he's probably going to lie a lot. So you have to make sure he's not lying. And hopefully you can have friends that can look out for him and give you updates and make sure he stays in line. It's not a lost cause, but it's very difficult. And you're going to have to really love that person to do that. Because it's going to be exhausting. And now, as far as dealing with that void and that emptiness, That's up to you. And that's up to you guys as a couple. Because you might not like finding out what that void is. It might have something to do with the spouse. It might have to do with someone else from his past. So that I won't say. But what I will tell you is that he will need to be babysit. You will have to do all that self-exclusion stuff. And I'll talk about this more in the subsequent audios, I'm sure. But that's what you have to do. So he's not a lost cause, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I hope that my story and that, well, the story that I shared at least, and my life experience will help somebody. And I plan to make more of this in the future, but I thought right now, where I'm at in my life, if I can just help one person or two people hear this, that'll make me feel better. And it's worth it. So I wanted to wish everybody a very happy holiday. Thanks for listening to me. Until next time, make sure you always take care of your physical and mental health. And you can only care for others when you care for yourself.